Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Planetos Podcast and the Blood of the Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle, also known as KW Dent.
I'm one of your other hosts, Travis, known as Sir Travis, one of the co-hosts of Planetos Podcast.
And I am the other co-host, Brett. You can find me on Twitter at HomelyPillow.
Awesome. And we are very excited to be bringing you our first crossover episode here in a planned series that will be all about some of our favorite theories that we are calling Theory Talk. So you'll be able to find this episode on both the Blood of the Podcast feed and the Planetos Podcast feed. And for me, this is really exciting for a few reasons. First and foremost, Travis and Brett actually sort of served as the catalyst to me building out my podcast when I appeared as a guest on the 5th episode of Planetos Podcast. Since then, as you all have maybe seen, I've launched my own podcast called The Blood of the Podcast, and the three of us have sort of remained friends on social media, pretty much interacting on a daily basis. So we decided it would be fun to come together from time to time for these sort of theory episodes where we're each going to be bringing a theory to the table. It's like tinfoil show and tell, basically. So this will then, after each one of us presents our evidence for the theory, be followed by a no-holds-barred discussion where we sort of discuss the implications, counter-arguments, any additional supporting arguments or counter-arguments for each theory. And then at the very end, we will vote on if we think the theory is true or ultimately false. So, spoiler warning before we get into it, we will be covering all current material relevant to the series, including A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons, Winds of Winter sample chapters, the Dunk and Egg novellas, The World of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood, theories, essays, videos, and Game of Thrones, the television show. So,
that's a lot of material.
It's a lot of material. George has given us lots of material to talk about, right? Even though we're still waiting for the Winds of Winter. But I think Fire and Blood's been fun to go into, and there'll definitely be some bits coming into this episode, I think, right, guys?
Absolutely. And I can't wait, especially for when the Winds of Winter comes out and A Dream of Spring comes out. And all you haters out there, we're going to get the end of the series. We're going to get it. Yes. But just to see what in Fire and Blood Volume 1 and what will eventually be in Fire and Blood Volume 2, what was literal red herrings that George put in there, because, you know, maybe as we go through this series here, which I'm really excited about, this Theory Talk series, it's going to be awesome. I think this is a great idea, Kyle. Thanks for coming to us with it. But we're really going to have a great time going through these theories and pulling in all of these different stories and books that provide evidence and counter argument, as you said, to some of the really great theories out there. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think definitely the thing about a lot of these theories that we'll be presenting is it's not necessarily always going to be supporting or even disagreeing with the theory, but going through the evidence and seeing where you can pull it from, because we have, as you said, we have so much material to work with that you can kind of find a lot of evidence for certain things and discovering if that's rather just narrative, you know, it's in there for the narrative to be a parallel, or if it actually means something is a lot of what we're going to be discussing. So you kind of touch into news and notes from around the fandom, which is something on my podcast I always like to go through, kind of just talk about the general happenings of what's going on within the fandom right now. So to get into that, I have to say, when I came on your guys' podcast last time, we made some predictions about when the Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 1 would be airing. And for some reason, I became very attached to being correct about this prediction for no reason. And I really thought I was going to be right about April 28th. And sadly, I was wrong.
I thought I was going to be right too, but
yes.
I thought I was right because I forgot which date I predicted too.
Wait, that was me. No, sadly, Sir Travis correctly predicted the premiere date of April 14th.
Yeah, Thank you. And to be fair, you guys were forced to make the prediction first, and so I just kind of split the difference and picked April 14th. Although leading up to the announcement, and I think it was Game of Owns that had the fact that the premiere date announcement has an announcement. They were making fun of the fact that HBO was, 3 or 4 days before saying, "Oh, check out Sunday. We're going to announce when the new season will premiere," which I thought was kind of funny.
Yes.
But leading up to it, I'll have to say, Kyle, I don't know how many of the luminaries, if we can call them that, that's just a little joke, but in the fandom were rallying around April 28th. You had Joanna Robinson, who everyone loves, but she has, she's obviously a television and film critic for Vanity Fair. And she had a very scientific reason. She was saying True Detective ends on this date. I can't remember the show that Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon. It's another HBO series my wife and I watched. It was pretty good. It comes on the next date, and so she was like, "Okay, well, April 28th," because they're just going to kind of lead into it. I think B-Fish and others were all saying April 28th, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, maybe it is April 28th." But then I kept thinking in the back of my mind, stick to April 14th. Prove these people wrong. And I did. Thank you.
I know. I felt so good about it. Everybody was like April 28th, and I felt so vindicated in this random guess I made in June or whenever that was.
Right.
But I was very, very sad to
look, I think that whenever it comes back, everyone was going to be excited.
Yes.
And I was actually kind of worried that it was going to be April 28th because that's the Sunday when Ice and Fire Con ends.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to get back to my home because, one, I want to watch Game of Thrones with my wife, but also I was like, oh my God, if the season premiere is happening and all the fans are staying to watch it, I'm going to feel really bad leaving, even though I still will probably feel bad leaving that Sunday because I think that's going to be the third episode, and I think we all think there's going to be a huge battle that happens in that episode. So
Right.
I'm going to rush back to West Virginia to get in front of my TV and log on to Twitter. And I've already started taking Monday mornings and Mondays off in April just because I know I'll be useless
very nice.
on Mondays.
Very nice. Yeah,
So,
definitely excited to announce that I know at least Sir Travis and myself will both be at Ice and Fire Con. So we'll definitely have a lot of fun there for everybody still sort of figuring out your con plans. I know Brett is planning on trying to attend.
Oh no, I'm buying tickets. I'm buying plane tickets first. Actually, I'm probably buying everything. So I'm just gonna be broke. I'm just gonna, if I have to be broke, I'm going.
So you heard it here. We will all be at Ice and Fire Con, and we will have tons of fun talking about how much we love and bashing on the show and Alan Taylor, etc. But so let's move on then and talk about. Well, go ahead, Brett. Go ahead.
Also, did you already explain that we're going to both release this episode on both of our channels, so you can find it on either Planetos Podcast or the Blood of the Podcast channel, right?
yes.
That is correct. I did say that, but that's an extra plug, so that's actually even better.
All right,
so we'll say it again later in the episode. No worries. So talking actually about the trailer that we have gotten, and so I guess either the teasers but I mean more the actual footage, the 5-second clip of Sophie Turner, or I guess she's Sansa in the show, right? Standing there as Daenerys walks up to her, and Sansa says, "Winterfell is yours, your grace." And this, of course, devolved into a huge Jonza versus Daenerys battle on Twitter and other mediums. But any thoughts on that one there, guys?
I hope not. I think it's ran its course. Yeah.
It's ran its course. It was a ridiculous course that it ran. It is an exact line parallel to what Ned Stark said to Robert Baratheon. It's common courtesy when someone of Robert Baratheon stature or Daenerys Targaryen stature enters your castle and you've allied with them. I'm sure there is going to be some questions on Sansa's part, maybe Arya's part, others' parts that maybe you should have consulted with us. Well, actually, I think maybe toward the end of season 7, we already saw the fact that that he had gone south and had and they felt he was going to ally with Daenerys. I think it's something that it's just kind of a ridiculous argument. She wasn't giving the castle up. I mean, people who were taking that that's just a dumb take, a really dumb take.
Have you watched this show? Yeah. Anyway,
right.
But yeah, I mean, people think Sansa's just like stupid and catty, and like and the show's kind of making her seem that way too in some of these little snippets and stuff. And I hope they don't go that direction, because Sansa is very she knows how to make political moves and use her lady status as as a weapon almost. Like she could just navigate the political landscape pretty much. So I just don't feel like she'd do anything irrational or have this big feud. She understands what's coming. It just seems like that's already passed. The political stuff's passed. Like Littlefinger's dead now, so there shouldn't be any of that until Cersei comes back around, because Cersei's supposed to be like that. She's the one, like, you know what I mean?
Right. And I don't want to dwell on this very long here. About what I'm going to say here. I also think it's the fact that we have two female characters, and any time in fiction or even in reality, when two women, especially two powerful women like Sansa and Daenerys, come together, you instantly have the fact that one of them has to take out the other, or one of them has to hate the other. And that's a really sexist belief and sexist was about these characters. Let's be fair. Sansa is going to have some questions about was this the right move to make? It's not a sexist comment. The same thing with Daenerys. Daenerys isn't going to come in and say, "Who's this redheaded girl? Get her out of my way." That's not going to happen. But they're both. Think of the family history here between these two great houses. Start with the fact that they're hesitant anyways, and they're probably also hesitant about. They're nervous about what's coming, the army of the dead. Sansa probably, here's a good point that I don't think got expressed either. Sansa probably is also thinking, you guys made a deal with Cersei. Do you understand what type of person she is? She's going to screw us over. I can't believe you just left King's Landing to her. So she might even say, boy, we should have really covered our rear here. We should have taken out Cersei and the Lannisters, because I've been there, guys. I know what she's capable of, and you all made a deal with her.
I feel like that should be the extent of any kind of conflict up there. But
yeah, I definitely think that. Sansa's not going to be like, "Oh, look, I'm so happy to have you here." She's gonna have, as you said, she's going to have questions surrounding this. I don't think it has anything to do with like either of them being women, or it's not. It could be any person. They're going to have questions about a new political alliance, and as you said, specifically about making a deal with Cersei, who is not trustworthy. But I thought the biggest takeaway from this really was that they make it back to Winterfell. This was not a guarantee that that Jon and Dany make it back to Winterfell before the fighting starts. So that was another big takeaway I had from it.
I just kind of hope that maybe they start to get a little they start to have a little bit of a conflict, and then Jaime comes through the front gate and he's like, "Hey guys,"
and they're like, "All right, we can be friends."
Everyone turns on him.
Yeah.
Yes, that could. We will have to see what happens, but I definitely got Twitter up and hyped talking about it for still kind of going on now. But so moving on here, the big question really, as we're still here in January, is the Winds of Winter coming out this year, guys? Is there a release date yet, or what?
I'm just gonna be happily surprised. I think I don't know. It could be this year. I feel confident that it is, or early 2020. But I'm not gonna go B-fish route where
I love going B-fish route though. Every time so just for anybody listening, if you're not aware, there was a period of time that ended about a week and a half ago or so, anywhere where George had not posted on his Not a Blog for 26 days or so. And it was an unprecedented amount of time. I made some tweets about how he had not gone this long posting since 2007 or so. So I was doing Beefish's dirty work on accident. But so, anytime you see these indications, we've all been waiting for so long. So it's kind of fun to get your hopes up, at least I think, even though, it's not going to happen. But I'm not sure about this year there myself. He did just release Fire and Blood, which I know was constructed of a lot of work he had done already. And he found that history is easier to write. So I think we'll have to see about this year, maybe 2020.
Yeah, I'm still very hopeful that it comes out this year. I would look for a fall release, and I don't think he, somehow the people out there who thinks there's some vast conspiracy that he's waiting to profit off of the HBO final season, etc., or that he's just been waiting to regain the narrative because he so hates the show at this point. I think it's just circumstances. If you look back over the past 2 or 3 years, with the fact that he's really tried to double down on The Winds of Winter, and he wrote Fire and Blood, and he's making all these other television deals on other works of his, and the successor show or the prequel series. I think it's just circumstance has led to the timing. I'm sure part of his equation is let me get the story out of the way, and then, let's let the show get out of the way, and then there'll be less pressure to an extent on me. I'll release it in the fall. I will get some of the story back because there are a number of characters and plots that were never in the show or that were ended early in the show that I can pull the fandom back to. But I think the positive thing for everyone is, and I saw someone say this just a few days ago on Twitter, it might have been even Wolfman Zach. He said something like, I'm so excited that even if the endings are different or they're slightly different, we get 2 ends to 2 great stories in this. That's a positive thing. That's a positive thing. So I'm still looking for, I'm going to make another bold prediction. I'm going to say sometime in September or October of this year.
I hope you're right. And do y'all remember or know when Fire and Blood was first announced? Because it came out in the fall, but when was it?
Quite a while before. I mean, I think
it was like maybe a year.
Yeah, a year at least. Yeah.
Okay.
And his announcement for A Dance with Dragons was he made an announcement in March or April, and it was released in July.
Oh, okay. So
he's done a short window of announcement and then release.
Okay, yeah,
I kind of look if he does announce it, I kind of look for him to announce after the show's end and after the show has ended. So late April or early May, and that's why I kind of lean toward October.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's either fall or kind of very early on in 2020.
Yeah, I could see that.
I could see early 2020 as well. I definitely do think we'll get a short release date, because he has been working on this for 8 years now. Right. That when he's done and it's edited and ready to go published, it'll be a matter of months, for sure is what I think. I think Fire and Blood's helped with a lot of that historical context too for him to kind of get down as he's moving forward. And as you said, what is a red herring in there? What's actually setting up groundwork for what's going to come in Winds and potentially, Dream later. But so that's all the news notes I had. Anything to add here before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as Kyle mentioned, he was on episode 5 of Planetos Podcast, and in that we talked about the game of predictions, speculation, trying to figure out what the end game is going to be or what the end of certain characters are going to be. And we want to announce that we're working. I'm working on it right now, and then Brett and I will unveil it at some point. We're working on a game of predictions for season 8, and we want to thank our friend, all of our friends, Pat Sponogle on Twitter, a writer for Watchers on the Wall. He has his own blog. He's appeared on the Planetos Podcast. I know he interacts with Kyle and all of us and all of the fandom constantly. He refers to himself as the fandom's grandfather.
That's great.
Pat is a great guy. He's a great guy. But he apparently at his work, he does a predictions game for his coworkers and his boss, and they submit what they think is going to happen, and then he awards points. And so Brett and I are trying to figure out how to do that. We don't want to be flooded with 2,000 predictions because we'll all go crazy. But it would be awesome to have something like that going that we can all kind of reward ourselves and reward each other and just like I would just be excited just to read some of it because I think there'll just be some absolutely great things in there. So look for that in the future from Planetos Podcast, but also we'll obviously have Kyle and others in the fandom help us with that.
Yeah, count me in for sure. That'll be fun. Maybe we can even have something sort of going on at Ice and Fire Con. We will both be there.
Oh, perfect idea. Yes.
Yeah, we'll let you know maybe what comes back on that from Ice and Fire Con. So
yeah.
But yeah, that could be a lot of fun. And go to Ice and Fire Con if you can. I'm trying to get everyone to go because I live like 15 minutes from it. So you all come to me sort of thing. But anyway, that will be a lot of fun. And that's a great idea. Thanks to Pat and Travis for really coming up with the idea. I saw you talking about it over on the Twitter. So that should bring us then to the bulk of our episode where we are going to talk about 3 different theories. And Travis is going to take our first one here.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So I get to talk about Tyrion Targaryen. Tyrion is a Targaryen. And I'm actually kind of excited to focus on this one and to present the evidence because... Sorry, something wrong?
Oh, no. I was just... but I was going to say, is this a theory that you like or you think is true, but you don't really like it?
We're gonna save that. We're gonna save that part.
Yeah, that'll be at the very end here.
Yeah. So, but I was going to add, I came in with a very. So let me back up. Early in my fandom years, in this fandom, I had a very specific view of this theory. In the past year or so, my opinion changed. And I'll talk about that at the end, and I'll present why, with the evidence for and against, why I think why I believe what I believe now. So here's some of the evidence that supports Tyrion Targaryen. So this is a theory that has been around the fandom for a very long time, and there are many fans who embrace it. There are many fans who shun it, that they don't want it to be true. And as we said, we're going to present some evidence here in support of the theory. And then later on, we'll talk about some of the contrary evidence and give our opinions on the matter. So first, it's pretty well known that the Mad King, Aerys II, had a thing for Joanna Lannister. It stated that he wished at one point that Prima Nocta, which we learn more about in Fire and Blood, how Good Queen Alysanne pushed for that to end, although it didn't completely end. But for the Targaryen dynasty, it did end. Although I think on Dragonstone it remained for some time. But anyways, he wished that Prima Nocta, which is the right of first night, the right of a lord or a king to take a bride on their wedding day, was still in practice because he obviously wanted to sleep with Joanna Lannister. So there's the desire there. There's the desire of Aerys II, who in this case would be Tyrion's father. He had a lust for Tyrion's mother. It's also said that on the wedding day, during the bedding that night, which, as we know throughout the series and in the Middle Ages itself, there was a very a bedding ceremony where they actually had people in the room sometimes with them, undressing them and even watching them have sex, which just seems absolutely insane. But he took liberties, it said. The Mad King took liberties with Joanna. Now, taking liberties, we don't know what that means, but we can probably assume they got a little handsy. Something happened.
At least
something happened. Yeah, something happened. There is also some evidence to suggest or to speculate that when Joanna was a lady in waiting before Ares was king, when he was prince, there's a rumor that she lost her maidenhead to Ares. And we know that Ares was very handsome, very regal when he was younger. He was definitely not the decrepit, foul, twisted monster that he was toward the end of his reign. So there's the rumor that he took her maidenhead. At some point after the Mad King and Queen and Rayella become king and queen, Joanna served as one of her ladies in waiting. So one of the ladies in waiting to the queen. Now she is dismissed at some point, Joanna is, and she returns to Casterly Rock. So remember, there's a lust that Ares has. We've gone through all that evidence. Now Joanna is dismissed for some reason. She doesn't stay away very long from King's Landing. She returns a few times here and there, but I think this is a really important piece of evidence for the theory. In 272 AC, Joanna returns to the capital for Ares's 10th anniversary on the throne. Now, in 273 AC, and it's suggested that it's about 9 or 10 months later, after the 10th anniversary of Ares's reign, Tyrion is born. That's a pretty strong piece of evidence.
Yeah, that's an interesting period of time. I wonder if I can think of anything, but
Yes, and first of all, some of these people, I don't know how they figure out the months in the time.
Yeah, it's
the Song of Ice and Fire, but sure, whatever.
It's never October or anything.
Right.
Yeah. I'm absolutely horrible with like the time, like just the dates. Like I'm like, where are they getting these dates from? Like,
well, the really quick aside at the very beginning of Fire and Blood, where like the Maesters argue about Aegon, when Aegon's landing was it when he landed or was it when he was crowned? And it's like, well, wait a minute. So you're saying it's year 2, about 300 in the story, but like if different people are calling it different things, then what the hell day is it? Like, anyway, continue.
Which is, not to get off here, but it's also true of our own world with dates and times and the fact that some holidays are taken from other religions. Anyways, okay, back to Tyrion Targaryen. So Joanna gives birth to Tyrion and she dies in childbirth, and we'll obviously talk more about childbirth here in just a minute, but Rayella dies in childbirth with Daenerys. Lyanna, we all believe, dies in childbirth with Jon. So that's kind of a parallel there, if Tyrion is a Targaryen, to Daenerys and Jon, 2 other true Targaryens in the story. Now, this one I think is a very interesting piece of evidence, and it's a piece of evidence that people have picked up on very early, but Fire and Blood gave us further information. So Tyrion has mismatched eyes, and they're mismatched eyes of green and black. Now, the Lannisters have green eyes. They're famous for their green eyes speckled with gold. So if one eye is green, then that shows the Lannister blood in Tyrion. His other eye is black, though. Now, you would say, well, why would it be black then if it's supposed to represent 2 sides of the Targaryens? Could be a reference to the Dance of Dragons, where the greens and the blacks warred for the throne. He's also described when he's a child and he's born that he's a monster. Now, we know, we'll talk about monster here in a little bit, so let me hold that point. We know that the Targaryens, Daenerys herself, whether it's true or not, is supposedly she gave birth to a monster, a winged scaled beast, as Miri Mazdor describes it. So there's a parallel to what happens with Tyrion and the way some Targaryen children are described in the stories. Again, we'll talk about the description of monster, because we don't think Tyrion is a monster, but the way the society describes him, that's a parallel. Now let's stay on the eyes here for a minute, because a very famous Targaryen, Shira Seastar, one of the bastards of Aegon the Unworthy?
Yes, the fourth.
Yeah. She has mismatched eyes. Now, Fire and Blood gave us Alyssa, one of Jaehaerys and Alysanne's daughters, and she has mismatched eyes of green and violet. And she actually, in the story, she breaks her nose and it re-heals crooked, which we think is sort of sounds like the way Tyrion's deformity after the Battle of Blackwater is described. Obviously, Tyrion loses his nose, and it's a deep scar and everything. But just the fact that her specifically her nose is crooked, and Tyrion loses his nose, could be a parallel that George is going for.
Yeah, George does these kind of parallels all the time, where
right.
It's not exactly like, it's just supposed to make you sort of think of it, which
exactly
is an interesting piece. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, some people theorize that Tyrion's black eye is not black at all, but instead it is a very dark purple. In fact, in reality, black does not appear as an eye color. Black is usually only used in fictional stories where, a demon or someone has black eyes, is menacing or whatever. So if it is a dark purple, then it would be symbolism that Tyrion is half Targaryen and half Lannister. Remember, he's got one eye that's green. All right. Tyrion's hair color is described as blonde, like the Lannisters, but it's said to be almost white, which is a trait of the Targaryens, that their hair is so blonde, or so silverish and blonde, that it appears almost white. Tywin constantly refers to Tyrion as "no son of mine." We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Tywin is adamant that Tyrion will never, ever inherit Casterly Rock. So if Tywin believes that Tyrion is the product of the Mad King Aerys and Joanna's, then obviously he would be no son of Tywin's, and he would not have rights to inherit Casterly Rock. Now, we know that Tyrion is a very bookish man. He's very intelligent. There's a lot of Targaryens that are famously bookish, including Aerys the First. And Tyrion, through this knowledge, has learned a lot about dragons. He's read so many books on them. We know that Tyrion dreams. He dreams of dragons. And as a child, Tyrion would set fires in the bowels of Casterly Rock, and he would stare into the flames, calling them dragon flame. Targaryens are famous for their affinity for fire, and for a lot of them staring into the flames. So I want to leave the evidence of Tyrion is a Targaryen with this last point. And it comes from Tyrion 3 in A Dance with Dragons. Now, Tyrion is on board the Shy Maid, which is the boat that is sailing for Slaver's Bay. And he is on board with Griff, who we find out obviously later is Jon Connington, and young Griff, who may or may not be Aegon the Sixth, the son of Rhaegar.
But definitely isn't.
Definitely isn't. But all right, so Tyrion, again, a very intelligent man, begins to pick up on the fact that the older man, Griff, who is presenting himself as a sellsword, can read. And he's reading a letter that has been sent by Magister Illyrio. And it's telling that Tyrion murdered his father. Griff is obviously very mistrustful of Tyrion. And Tyrion, again, suspects that this man is no ordinary sellsword. Most sellswords can't read. They are, primarily from a level of society where that's just not either important or unattainable. So Tyrion begins to deduce. Tyrion begins to deduce that Griff can read. He's probably a knight, and he in fact has knighted Duck himself, another companion in this party. And, Tyrion eventually figures out that he's John Connington and who the boy is. But Tyrion, in this scene in particular, promises to serve Daenerys Targaryen faithfully. But he's still skeptical at this point. He's still skeptical of Daenerys and whether she has dragons or not. And he asks this question. What if we should find the queen and discover that this talk of dragons was just some sailor's drunken fancy? This wide world is full of such mad tales. Grumpkins and snarks, ghosts and ghouls, mermaids, rock goblins, winged horses, winged pigs, winged lions. Griff tells him, obviously, to guard his tongue or he will lose it. Another reference to the fact that Tyrion might lose his tongue, which we may talk about in a later episode. But winged lions, lions. So, if Tyrion is a Lannister that is also a Targaryen, then he would be a winged lion. There you go. Tyrion is a Targaryen. I rest my case.
I just literally went through that chapter where the winged lion reference was mentioned a few days ago, and if you didn't say it, I was going to pitch that to you. If you didn't throw that in your argument for him.
All right,
but, big piece for sure. So I added something that I just thought of as you were going through this here. So if Tyrion was in fact the son of Aerys and Joanna Lannister, it would make him a bastard, of course, and bastards of the Westerlands go by with the surname Hill, and in A Dance with Dragons, Tyrion goes by none other than Huber Hill.
Yes,
so, interesting little note. I don't know. Technically, a bastard of the king, he might not be a Westerland bastard, but yeah, semantics. It supports my argument, so we're going to go with it here and say that's an interesting point.
It's actually just up to the parents whether they want to go with. That's why Jon Snow could be a Snow or he could be a Sand.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, no, you're right. I was just getting ready to say the same thing, Brett. But Kyle, I think that's a great inclusion on the evidence that he is a Targaryen, that he's and therefore a bastard of Tywin, and would another clue that George laid in there that he adopts the name Hill. But yeah, Brett, you are right that it's up to the individual parent or even where they're from, because as we see, like you said with Jon Snow, he could actually be a Sand, but technically he's a bastard of Ned Stark, so he's a Snow.
Right. Yeah, great. So you, the first note I also wanted to go over definitely for the pros here, in that chapter in A Dance with Dragons, and it's in a Dany chapter where we get the piece about potential relations between Joanna and Aerys, and Barristan is the one telling her this line that you covered, that Aerys took special liberties, and it reads so very like he's very painfully talking about it. And then she kind of tries to push him on it, and he's like, I've said too much, my lady. I shouldn't have ever said it. And it's very like, this might just be Barristan being a prude. That's totally a possibility. But I feel like when I actually read it for the first time, when I read this for the first time, I was actually aware of the Tyrion is Targaryen theory. And when you read it in the book, it's like, holy shit, that's a pretty big piece of evidence there that this might be true. So definitely that combined with the 9 to 10 months after Joanna had come to King's Landing, and she, as you said, when she's dismissed by Queen Rhaella, I believe it's indicated too that she tells Ares, "I will not let you turn my ladies into whores."
Right.
I believe that's the line. So very on the head stuff that there is maybe something going on. Now we have no real confirmation of what exactly that might be, which is why this is still such a theory. But there's definitely a lot of positive evidence going for it. And as you said at the beginning, about a year ago or so, this was a theory that I was very much like, stop talking about it. This isn't going to happen. I know there's a couple things here and there, but it seems like some of the pieces have started coming together more. And I think a lot of people really have trended more towards being like, oh, wow, we really have to consider this as a possibility now. So it's definitely an interesting one to cover.
There's another line I think Tywin says something about you only have my name because I can't prove that you're not mine,
right?
Or something. So
yes.
So I think Tywin is very. I think he's aware of he may
that's
or may not, and that's why he's just so bitter.
It's
a possibility.
And then, of course, Tyrion's just like him, but also that kind of I don't know. Yeah, I'm the same way. I was, the theory made sense to me, but I was like, and I'm still kind of like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like there's a hidden Targaryen everywhere, but
right
in the the famous words of Maynard Plum, when he's responding to who is it in the third Duncan Egg novella where they said, there might be, there'd be I'm butchering this.
I know the line that you're going. I don't remember who he's saying it to.
But basically, they're saying, we're all Targaryens if whatever, and Sir Maynard Plum's like, oh, who's to say we're not, So there are the Targaryens are very promiscuous, so that means there could be hidden Targaryens everywhere, and I think that's probably true in real life with nobility, like European nobility, and there's probably all kinds of affairs, and they didn't have pregnancy or
test.
DNA test. So
yeah, I think definitely, and I think Travis, you did a great job laying out the evidence for it. Certainly, building right from the Prima Nocta Lord's Right is where this sort of question starts. Where could Tywin really have allowed this to happen? But we know, of course, that relationship with Aerys and Tywin was strained for many reasons. But then looking forward to Tywin marching on King's Landing during the conclusion of Robert's Rebellion, sacking the city, and I mean, essentially turning on Aerys. Mind you, the war had at this point been largely decided, but still, you could certainly look at it as a point of Tywin, whether he knows or not, certainly having fostering negative relationships with Aerys Targaryen, and that's for many reasons. But you can definitely see it fits like this narrative tone of Tyrion maybe being like that final really big straw that broke the camel's back in this sort of examination.
Yeah. I think that there is pretty, after we discuss some of this, some pretty strong evidence to suggest this might be true.
Yes. Which that kind of so the theory I'm doing, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and jump into that.
So we want to talk about some of the evidence against Tyrion as a Targaryen,
yes.
And then transition. Okay. You'll have anything else to talk about supporting evidence of Tyrion Targaryen? Anything else?
I think you did a good job covering it. If we think of any, we can backtrack. But yes, let's continue on with the against.
Okay. So we're fair at Planetos Podcast and Blood of the Podcast. So we are going to present now the evidence that Tyrion is not a Targaryen. All right. First of all, we talked about that Aerys is handsome, He has a lust for Joanna. He apparently has a lust for other women, but nowhere in the story thus far are we presented with any evidence of other Ares bastards, other children of Ares, or whatever. Now, that could be very deliberate in the fact that George only wants Tyrion to be his only bastard, or it could reflect the fact that perhaps Ares actually really did love Joanna, and so while he was unfaithful to Rhaella, he was, only in love with Joanna. But I think it's interesting that there are no other bastards for someone who, it's said that he lusted for women. He had an attraction to women. He lusted after other women. That there are no other bastards in the series as of now. That would have been Ares's children. The wedding ceremony between Tywin and Joanna. It's said that Ares took liberties. Now, let's be very clear. I don't think liberties equates to rape or intercourse. I don't think Tywin probably would have let that stand uncontested. Tywin is a very proud man. He's not going to allow the king to rape or sleep with his wife on that. Again, I think I described in the evidence for that Liberties is probably getting a little handsy. He was touching her. He may have been touching her breast or whatever. So while that's terrible, that does not equate to sexual intercourse, and therefore conceiving, he wouldn't have obviously conceived Tyrion at this point, but it doesn't prove that he had sex with her. Tyrion has dragon dreams. Yes, he does. But here we believe that Jon is a Targaryen. He doesn't have dragon dreams. Most Targaryens do. Even Shireen, perhaps. But she could also be dreaming simply of the gargoyles and dragon statues that surround her and her family on Dragonstone. Or her dragon dreams could be particularly prophetic of the fact that she may die in the flames.
What?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, she technically does still have a little bit of Valyrian blood in her, too, so...
Well, yeah, she does. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And by saying that, by using those examples, I'm simply saying that dragon dreams are not a prerequisite for having Targaryen blood.
Definitely, especially with Jon. So, said,
yeah, Jon doesn't have them. Now, will he start having them when it's revealed that he's a Targaryen? Maybe. Or maybe even some of the dreams he has of the Winterfell crypts are the type of dragon dreams he's having. Anyways, it does not mean that you are a Targaryen because you have dragon dreams. We talked about the fact that Joanna dies in childbirth, and that could parallel Lyanna dying with Jon and Rhaella dying with Daenerys. But we know throughout this series and in the actual real setting of the Middle Ages, the medieval period, women died all the time in childbirth. Women die today in childbirth. So it doesn't mean that Tyrion is a Targaryen because his mother died in childbirth. Tyrion is a dwarf with deformities. Now, that could be described, especially in this time period that George is using, as a monster. We know that Tyrion is not a monster. That especially Cersei describes him as such, but we obviously know why Cersei doesn't like Tyrion because of the Valonqar prophecy. But a dwarf with deformities, that's not enough for Tyrion. That is enough for Tyrion or for Tywin to simply hate Tyrion because it's about pride and legacy with Tywin. And, Tyrion's misshapen head, his mismatched eyes, his short body, his stunty legs, all of that stands in total opposition to the image that Tywin is projecting as a perfect family, which we're going to talk here in just a minute about what perhaps Tyrion's deformities reflect actually on Tywin. Now, Tyrion reads a lot, period. I mean, he reads a lot. He's going to know a lot about everything, including dragons, because that's such an important element in Planetos. Dragons are the paramount creature, the paramount myth, the paramount magic, if you will, in Planetos. And so Tyrion, being a voracious reader, he reads everything. The famous line that, a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. He's going to come across dragons, and therefore he's going to know a lot about dragons, because Tyrion wants to gain knowledge, because to him, knowledge is what sets him apart, what keeps him alive, what keeps him smarter than all of the other lords who have better looks, who have athletic physiques, all of that. Tyrion doesn't have that, so he has to keep his mind sharp, and knowledge keeps your mind sharp. As Brett said, there are no DNA tests in Westeros. There's no Maury Povich to sit on a couch with you and feel whether or not your child is yours or not. So we'll never truly know whether the theory is true or not. But the same is true. Tywin will never truly know. Tommen's hair, it's actually described as almost white in a Game of Thrones when he arrives at Winterfell. So while Tyrion's is almost white, well, so is Tommen's. No one's out there theorizing that Tommen is a bastard. Oh, well, he is, but not a bastard of the Targaryen dynasty.
Scribble down, Tommen is a Targaryen theory.
Yeah.
Move on.
There you go. So all you have to have is all you have to link him to Tyrion, and then use all the evidence to suggest Tyrion's a Targaryen, and then you say, well, Tommen obviously is, because they share the same hair color.
Yeah, as soon as Tyrion is revealed to be a Targaryen, I'm definitely going to reveal my essay proving that Tommen is also a Targaryen. So get ready here.
Well,
Your essay will be Tyrion has almost white hair, Tommen has almost white hair, and then see evidence for Tyrion is a Targaryen.
Yeah, I'm just
that will be it. That will be it.
Well, it's kind of funny, but so it could potentially be like all the land or Baratheon, whatever. I don't know, whatever they are. They're bastards. But it could be that they all had really light hair, because it's a thing when like when a child hits puberty, their hair darkens a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Could just be that, but
Could be, yeah. All right. So as to Tywin, the fact that he says you're no son of mine, he constantly talks about Tyrion. He can't prove that Tyrion is his, so you can use my name. If Tywin suspected that Aerys was his father, why did Tywin continue to serve his hand? Tyrion is born in 273. There would have been, again, physical evidence, mismatched eyes, hair color, deformity, etc., starting as early as 273, 274. Tywin eventually resigns in 281. So he remained as Aerys' hand for a number of years. Now we know Tywin is prideful and he wants to control, and potentially he wants to technically be in charge. But I just think if he suspected Tyrion was Aerys' child, you stuck around for a long time. So why didn't he kill Tyrion? Tywin has ample opportunity throughout Tyrion's life to kill him. And the dwarfism in this type of society is enough for a man like Tywin Lannister to kill a child. But if he also suspected that he actually wasn't him and he was the product of the Mad King, he might also kill Tyrion. But I want to come back to this next point in the end, because I think it's very vital to the evidence against Tyrion as a Targaryen. And that's Gemma Lannister's conversation with Jaime and Tyrion or Jaime about Tyrion, that Tyrion acts just like Tywin, that he's the mirror of Tywin. So I'll come back to that in a minute. I want to run through a few more points, and then we'll talk about that here at the end in the evidence against this theory. Quaithe. Everybody knows Quaithe. She's a recurring character in Dany's arc. She comes at significant moments to, tell Dany some prophecy, give her a riddle, whatever, to kind of set her on a certain path. But one of her famous lines that she delivers to Dany is, "Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others. Kraken and dark flame, lion and griffin, the sun's son and the mummer's dragon." Lion. That's Tyrion, right? Tyrion is the lion that's coming to her. The pale mare is obviously the disease that's falling on Slaver's Bay. The others, that could be a reflection that eventually the others are coming. But if you look at the way the line is constructed, soon comes the pale mare, and after her, the others. Kraken, Victarion, the Greyjoys, and Dark Flame, Mokoro, Lion, Tyrion, Griffin, Jon Connington, the Sun's Son, Quentin, the Mummer's Dragon, Aegon. So we think in this context, Lion is Tyrion.
Yeah.
Mokoro's vision, where he shares it directly with Tyrion. Dragons old and young, true and false, bright and dark. And you, a small man with a big shadow, snarling in the midst of it all. Now, Mokoro is thought to be a much better Red Priest than Melisandre is. So we know that he, too, can look into the flames and see things. He has visions. Why doesn't he see Tyrion here as a dragon? An old one, a young one, a true one, a false one, a bright, dark, whatever. But and you, a small man with a big shadow, snarling in the midst of it all. I think snarling there kind of reflects more of a lion than a dragon. And then, while there, as we touched on, there is evidence to suggest that Tyrion is a Targaryen, you should also look at Jaime and Cersei. Right? Yeah. If you believe, if some of the evidence that proves that Tyrion is a Targaryen, then you should also support the theory that Jaime and Cersei are Targaryens.
Sure, yeah.
Targaryens are famous for having twins. Jaime and Cersei are twins. Targaryens are famous for not supporting incest, but loving their brothers and sisters. Jaime and Cersei do that as well. So, if you tend to believe Tyrion is a Targaryen, you need to also believe that Jaime and Cersei, because if Aerys loved Joanna, then he had the same ability to impregnate her with Jaime and Cersei that he did Tyrion. George himself is asked one time by a fan, as we talked earlier, the mothers to Dany, Tyrion, and Jon die in childbirth, and their fathers at the time were either not present or dead. So he's asked by a fan, who named Dany, Tyrion, and Jon? Who named them, since their mothers died in childbirth and their fathers were either dead or not present at the birth, potentially. Dany's mother named her, George says. Tyrion's father named him. And Ned named Jon. So we know who Dany's mother is, Rhaella. It's not Ashara Dane or Lyanna. Please stop saying that. Dany's mother named her Rhaella. Tyrion's father named him Tywin, and Ned named John. That's how he answered.
That's an interesting.
That's an interesting quote that he uses.
Yeah, interesting for a lot of reasons there.
Exactly. So in the show, we still have season 8 to go. But really, if you look at it, there's really been no hints whatsoever during the series that Tyrion's true heritage is Targaryen. I think some people obviously speculate the fact that he could approach Dany's dragons as evidence of that. But we can talk probably in your section, Brett, about Valyrian blood dragon riders, etc.
Yeah.
And perhaps, but anyways, there's just nothing to it on the show. And I know some people think, well, they cut that on the show because they changed it on the show because they wanted to do whatever. Well, part of that is they're trying to either cut unnecessary threads, or they just didn't have enough time to get to certain things. But I think if Tyrion was a Targaryen, that would be very important in the context of the show. The winged lion. Tyrion suggests when he's talking that it's a mad tale. It's a mad tale that the dragons could be true. So in the context of the quote, the winged lion could be a mad tale. George could be saying, Tyrion is a Targaryen is a mad tale. Stop talking about it. But also, specifically, a winged lion is a griffin. He is pointing directly to Griff and saying, I know who you are. You are John Connington of House Connington. You are the Griffin reborn. I know who you are. That's what he's saying there. It doesn't point to him. It points to Griff. And then finally, is everyone in this story a secret Targaryen? Like, not everyone can be a secret Targaryen. And I know there's a lot of it. And if you look at real medieval history, there are baby swaps, there are secret children, there are bastards, all of that all happens. But we are inundated with secret Targaryens. And I just don't think that I'm sorry, I'm not going to say what I think. Sorry, let me back up. So, is everyone in this story a secret Targaryen? We have a lot of secret Targaryens already. So I think this could potentially be a red herring. And then finally, one final point, and I think it's the most important point. I think it all comes down to the reason George created Tyrion. And we said earlier that Tyrion is a mirror of Tywin. He is a reflection, just as Tywin is a reflection of Tyrion and Tyrion's potential to go very dark. He's written that way. It's thematically poignant for Tyrion to be Tywin's son. He's the most like Tywin in terms of his worldview and his leadership style. He craves Tywin's attention and approval. Tyrion works very hard to protect his family. Even like they hate him. They treat him terribly. They treat him like shit. And he understands that protecting them also protects him because he understands the importance of wealth and power and symbolism. That's what Tywin does. That's how Tywin manages, for a large part of the story, to win the Game of Thrones. Now, true, Tywin hates Tyrion, yet his youngest son is the one most like him. He's the one most keen and able to carry on Tywin's legacy. And that's why Tywin hates him, because he's an unpleasant mirror that forces Tywin to confront his own flaws and mistakes and to reckon with the fact that the best vessel to protect House Lannister and their pride, their pride is not the golden boy Jaime Lannister, and is certainly not Cersei. It's Tyrion the dwarf. I rest my case that Tyrion is not a Targaryen. That is the evidence against Tyrion as a Targaryen.
Whew. I'll jump in here. This theory is so fun to me because you can listen to the pros and come out and being like, wow, holy shit, there's a lot of pros. And then you can listen to the against and be like, wow, there are just as many againsts. Yeah. And I think that's why, like, lots of people in the fandom, luminaries or people who don't read the books, etc., like, are really split on this theory right now because there's a lot of evidence on both sides. So, quick clarification, and you mentioned it, but just to add to it, liberties not meaning that Ares necessarily had sex with Joanna on their wedding night, on Tywin and Joanna's wedding night. I'd say this is probably likely that did not occur. This is merely to set the precedence that Ares had this much lust for her, because, right, of course, Cersei and Jaime would not have been born yet. So this is in no way connected to Tyrion's potential conception, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think and you mentioned that, but just wanted to say that's definitely, I agree, is what I'm saying on that point. So with Tywin, and I had another point here, but I would definitely lean towards the evidence that Tywin did not know that if this theory were true and Tyrion was Ares's bastard son, that Tywin did not know because, like, as you said, he stays on for 8 years after this would have happened, right after Tyrion would have been born. So very unlikely that Tywin knew. Other than that, yeah, I think a really strong textual evidence, pulling quotes straight from Makoro, or straight from Quaithe, that is, talking about the Kraken, Dark Flame, Lion, and Griffin, the Sun's Son, and the Mummer's Dragon. I mean, we know who all these people are, right? Like, for sure. Victarion, Makoro, Tyrion, John Connington, Quentin, and Aegon. I mean, for sure. So the fact that Tyrion's in there, and if Quaithe is what we think she is, then it's very likely she's accurate in that case. So definitely have to agree on those points.
Yeah, and I just think George's wording, I didn't know about that, but the way, he just says Tyrion's father, Dany's mother, and then Ned. That's just an interesting choice of words.
Yes, for sure, agreed. I would also say with that one, tangenting a little off here, where saying that Ned named Jon, because of course we know, at least from the show, and we actually talked about this in Planetos Podcast's 5th episode about Jon's name, and how I personally believe it will be different in the books, or his true Targaryen name. But George saying Ned named Jon might be a really small indication that he did in fact have a different name, and Ned decided to call him Jon, since it's different from the wording of that. Mind you, this is George just answering a question. Who knows if he's really thinking
right and
through, but
does George want to reveal Jon is a Targaryen through a reply to a fan? No, he doesn't.
No.
That's a good point, Kyle, that he doesn't want to give away things, and it also could be a clue that the name Jon was conceived by Ned, but it's to be revealed, not his real name.
Yeah,
he purely says Jon was the name Ned chose. It's kind of like, but it sounds like there's a but after that statement.
Okay.
But that's a different topic.
Yeah.
Let's see. I thought of something here, and I just noted it and couldn't think of what I wanted. If it comes back to me, I'll say. But anything else that you have to add here, Brett, on against? I think there's a lot of really strong points, not only narratively. There are major strong narrative points to Tyrion not being a Targaryen. Of course, it would sort of limit the reveal that Jon is a Targaryen, as is very often talked about. I do think, if this theory is true, that I don't think it's going to be intrinsically or purposefully revealed within the books. I think it will continue to sort of be something that Tyrion never finds out about, or maybe we even never find out about. Maybe we'll just be arguing this point until we're 90 years old, rereading the books for the 1,000th time,
Yeah, I honestly think that's going to be the case. I don't, because it doesn't seem very important to the narrative. Unless maybe, Varys somehow knows or something like that,
Sure.
But I don't even know if Varys was working for the Mad King at that point or not.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I mean, it could be. I don't know though. I don't think it'll be revealed though, or have much to do with the main story.
Yeah, I agree that if it is true, I don't think it will be revealed.
Yeah, because Tyrion's already sided with Dany, or he's trying to. He's already, actively working, with Illyrio for the Targaryens, or the Blackfire. So it wouldn't really matter either way.
Yeah, and I do have to say, and this is something I talk about on my podcast a lot, as somebody who writes myself, I do have to say this: Tyrion being a mirror of Tywin, as Travis dropped the mic with, is such a great narrative purpose to both Tyrion's arc, Tywin's life, and his legacy that he's so obsessed with that it was sort of, I don't want to say doomed because of Tyrion, but it didn't look the way he thought it would, right? Which is, again, a common theme George uses, that prophecy or the future doesn't turn out the way you think it will, even if you think you have an idea. That this is what Tywin was left with. He had Jaime Lannister, the first son of first sons, if there ever were any, right?
Yeah.
And
right,
Tyrion is the one who best is representative of him, and he's never going to be able to get past that. You know what I mean? So that's it fits both of their stories so narratively well. I mean, it's puzzle pieces that just cling together, so I think that's a great point to end with on the againsts there, Travis.
Well, and I think there's a reference in, I think that A Clash of Kings, where, Tyrion's like using Varys to sneak into the, to go see Shane, and they're using the back tunnels, and Varys said these tunnels were built for a hand of the king, but he doesn't specify which hand of the king.
Yes.
And then later you get Shay, in Tywin's bed, and, before Tyrion kills her, and then goes and kills Tywin. And so a lot of the theories are that hand of the king was Tywin, and then Tyrion's doing the same thing, so.
Right. And, Tyrion, I think that's another perfect piece of evidence that suggests that Tyrion is a true son of Tywin. And we know in Tyrion's arc already in A Dance with Dragons, and what we think is going to happen in The Winds of Winter, Tyrion is on a dark path. He is going to lie. He is going to push Dany to do things because he wants to see his brother and sister in Westeros pay, and that's some Tywin level shit that he's going to potentially unleash.
Oh yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, have to agree. Well, I've really enjoyed this Tyrion discussion. This is such a fun theory. Do you guys have any additions here before we move on?
I do not.
No.
Great. So go ahead, Brett.
Okay. Well, I think this next theory kind of it goes hand in hand with the Tyrion, or it feeds it, or the Tyrion Targaryen theory feeds into this theory, or the other way around.
Yep.
My theory is the Valyrian blood dragon rider theory, which is you need Valyrian blood to ride a dragon. So this theory is basically, if you don't have Valyrian blood, you're not riding a dragon. Now, most of my evidence has direct counter evidence depending on which way you look at it. So I guess I'm just going to kind of state the evidence. I'm going to do it a little different than Travis did. I'm going to state the evidence with the counter evidence. I think that'll work a lot better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The first one I have is the dragon seeds, and this is in the Dance of the Dragons. Jacaerys, which is one of the sons, right, of Rhaenyra, I believe.
Yes, I think. He's definitely in your camp. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. You can tell me if I'm wrong on Twitter, please.
Yeah. So he's Prince Jacaerys, so the son of Rhaenys. So he called out to dragon seeds, promising knighthood and wealth to anyone on Dragonstone. And the right of the first night was banned at this point, but it stated several times that the Targaryens still practiced that. So all these dragon seeds were supposedly random, just chosen at random, but so they could be random people, but there were so many Targaryens on this island that they probably went around, and there's probably a ton of bastards. Most of these dragon seeds are probably Targaryens.
Well, I'll jump in and definitely say, just to support your with the dragon seeds.
Yeah,
it's interesting, right? Because we're told, of course, and maybe you call this propaganda, that these are Targaryen bastards, all of them. Yeah, they totally have Targaryen blood for sure.
Yes.
That's sort of the argument, and certainly with Nettles is the one everybody goes to because she doesn't have any of the Targaryen looks to her.
Yes, yeah.
And this isn't necessary. I mean, look, we have. Baelor Breakspear was Dornish looking, right? So it's by no means a for sure indication that you're not a Targaryen if you don't have silvery hair. Right? We see plenty of Targaryens like this.
Yes.
But a lot of people will point to Nettles, who was also a maybe random girl who's being claimed as a bastard, to say, well, shit, do you really need Valyrian blood? So definitely an interesting point that we get in Fire and Blood.
Yes.
With dragon seeds.
I mean, there's... So, like, each of these dragon seeds, it seems like they were able to mount the dragon in various different ways, too, which kind of goes against this theory. Nettles kind of, tricked Sheepstiller and, into trusting her. Then she mounted him. It said that some people just had to be, strong-willed and minded and just... mounted the dragon like Ulf the White and Hugh the Hammer were apparently, in the case of which is not a dragon seed, but Arya, who mounted Balerion.
Right.
It said you've got to form like a special bond, but it seems like she kind of really didn't. She just kind of one day jumped on Balerion and took off. I know she spent time in the dragon pit, but I'm not really certain on that, but it just seemed like it was just kind of a random thing that happened. Like she just somehow was already bonded to it. So that there are plenty of different ways to mount a dragon and ride it. So, and there's evidence of Targaryens being eaten by dragons. So I don't think necessarily having Valyrian blood gets you onto a dragon, but this is just saying ultimately you have to have the dragon blood in you to have the chance to ride a dragon. Pretty
must have much dragon ride or dragon blood to play, sort of thing.
Yeah, like it doesn't guarantee you get the dragon, but you have to have it to start. And
go ahead.
So some evidence for this is the Valerians and the Kraykals. Yes, they have Valyrian blood, but they weren't traditionally dragon riders. So you don't see any examples of them, with the exception of the two Valerians that were Targaryen on the mother's side. I didn't write their names down, but they were Valerians, but they were directly tied in blood to Targaryens. But other than that, you don't get any examples of them riding dragons. And
right. Specifically, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah.
But so it is also noted when Prince Jacaerys offers lands and titles, and of course a dragon if you come in and you're able to tame a dragon. And some of the people that came forward for this included Rhaenyra's Lord Commander Sir Stephen Darklyn and Lord Gorman Massey. Now, both of them end up being eaten by the dragons that they consequently attempt to bond with, and this is referred to as the sowing of the seeds or the red sowing. And I think being put with the dragon seed discussion, this is kind of supposed to maybe show you, and maybe this is George being cheeky, showing us a Darklyn and a Massey and saying, well, these dudes got eaten because they weren't, or potentially weren't, Valyrian blooded. We don't necessarily know that they didn't have some amount of Valyrian blood from their family history, but I'm going to go ahead and say they don't for now, because I think it's likely that they did not. And then we're given these dragon seeds who were able to mount their dragons. Of course, Nettles, as you said, kind of games the system a little bit.
Yes.
In being able to mount her dragon. It's then also like interestingly noted that she later potentially is the founder of the clansmen of the Eyrie, which is really interesting that we're maybe in a Game of Thrones when we meet Shagga, son of Dolph, like looking at the potential bloodlines from Nettles, which is interesting world building on George's part. But, yeah, Nettles is cool. So is Adam Valerian, but those aren't the points I'm trying to make here. I do think it's definitely shown that we have to be at least thinking about how important is Valyrian blood in this. And I have another. I'll turn it over to maybe Travis here. What are your thoughts on this, or any other additions anyone has?
Yeah, so this to me, this is a very complicated.
It is
theory, because you got to go way back, and you got to ask the two questions that people, I think, will be debating until the end of the series. Is blood magic? Are dragons magic? If you're just a step back, if like I can't ride a horse, like I have no skill. I get nervous on them. It's because when I was visiting family in Arizona one time, this horse named Spider-Man just kept going and he wouldn't stop, and I thought we were going to go into a ravine even though it was very flat. But anyways, like I have absolutely no skill to ride a dragon or to ride a horse.
Well,
Jesus Christ. Well, yeah. I wish I could ride a dragon because there'd be a lot of people. Anyways, so it goes back to it, is blood magic? Are dragons magic? So depending on where what your answer to those questions are, I think it then sort of begins to lead you down multiple paths.
Yes.
Because if blood is magic, then I think that dragons being magic, those two are linked. The fact that riding one and using one has some magical abilities. I think it also goes to the fact that, and I don't think we'll ever know the true answers to those. Yes, I think George has said dragons are magical creatures. But I also think it goes to the fact that he wants magic to be tempered. He doesn't want you to know the parameters of magic because he thinks it's overused in fantasy, and that some people, there's some authors out there that, and some fans like that. I think it's Brandon Sanderson. Series, like the magic is very particular. There are set rules and how people use them. In some instances, or in some other books, magic is just this free form thing where at any time the plot can change because a wizard steps in there. George hates that. He doesn't like that. And I don't think he likes either. He wants it to be, did Nettles get on there because she's a Targaryen? Or did she just endear herself? Back to my point about riding a horse. Maybe if I spent more time around a horse and became comfortable with a horse, I would develop those innate skills, or the horse would trust me, where some other people who have confidence in it just hop on a horse and take off, no worries. And there's obviously a huge difference between a horse and a dragon, but to me, the fact still remains that you can create a bond with an animal. And some people are unable to create a bond with an animal. But I think in George's world, the magic is the main motivator. You know, the blood, if blood is magic and dragons are magic, I think that's the motivator that really leads me to believe that potentially you have to have a certain type of blood or a certain makeup or a certain disposition of blood in order to ride a dragon.
Yes.
So I'm glad you brought up blood, because that ties into a point I had sort of been looking into with this. And that comes from a Dance with Dragons chapter, where she's talking about dragon riders and how to control a dragon, become a dragon rider, as this is central to her plot, right? As soon as these dragons start to get big, she's like, oh shit, I have to like be able to control them, right? And she talks about how old Valyrians used to use magic to bind dragons to them. And of course, she's only heard this through stories and tales. But let's take that and think about it, that if Valyrians used magic to bind dragons to them, this could be why Valyrian blood still seems to be necessary in controlling and riding a dragon. Because long ago, runic abilities were put into Valyrian blood, and as it's been passed down, that's kind of remained. And there aren't many Valyrians, of course. The Targaryens, Valerians, and Celtigars, I think, are the only houses left. But so that could just be remnants of something like that. And now we see, and this is a little bit of what I'm going to talk about later, but so we see Dragonbinder in A Feast for Crows with Euron, right? And he's claiming that this can control a dragon, which remains to be seen.
I do have a point on that. So, you know, there's a big theory that somehow Euron's going to blow this horn and jump on this dragon, or you know, something along those lines. But the way I'm kind of thinking it's going to happen, and then there's also the theory that he may become the new Night's King. But I think, somehow he's going to have to transform and maybe, you know, kill this dragon, resurrect it in order to actually be able to ride it. And maybe the horn might temporarily make it lose control, but I don't know. You know, I just don't know exactly how that'll go down, but I feel like he's going to have to transform himself and that dragon to bind himself to it, if that's the way it goes.
The one thing I want to say about, and I'm sorry, Kyle, I know you were going to make the point on Dragonbinder.
No, I can jump. Yeah, go ahead. I'll jump back into it later.
If you have to have Valyrian blood to ride a dragon, why is there a horn to bind a dragon to you? Like, I don't get that.
Yeah, that's one of my counterpoints, or counter evidence to this theory, is that exists. So
what if, and I'll counter your point, because you're right. I think that's a great question. It's like, well, why do we have this horn? What if the actual magical ability of the horn is an endowment effect on your blood? And that's what makes a dragon, that's what makes it work. Say it works, right? I know there's arguments about if it'll work. We'll see in wins, probably very early on. But if that's what the horn, multiple horns, I'll talk about later, but if that's what Dragonbinder does, maybe that's also the Valyrian magic that we see Dany talking about, and that they used to use horns in order to do this. And the remnants of that magic have stayed, and that's what we're now seeing with Dragonbinder. Now, there's a lot of variables there we don't know about, but we do see that Dragonbinder is magic, clearly. And if it does work, maybe that's what it does to make a dragon bind to you. So we'll see, but it's an application that might make sense.
Yeah, and it could be, you know, if you go way, way, way back, Valyrians and dragons weren't. I mean, I don't think we know this. I definitely think we don't know this, but it's like they were created together, and you know, some god said, well, here's the person and here's the creature that he's going to ride. So it's somewhere that you had to connect. Now, whether that's they created a horn, they understood magic, and they created a horn that binded these dragons to them, and then the innate abilities developed, or it was something to, as you said, endow them with more power or endow other people with more power. I don't know, but I think that's a great point that this could be an ancient relic of a long past, and just kind of it fell out of favor with Valyrians. Well, we don't need that anymore. We've got the magical ability in our bloodstream.
Right.
Well, and there was a whole society of dragon riders. They can't all be gone. The Valyrians controlled a lot of the known world, so I'm surely there's got to be some other people out there with this ability that are not Targaryens but have a pass to Valyria.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a really in the weeds.
Yeah,
it's a great point.
But then you get the Valerians and the Kraykals. They were Valyrians, but you don't get any examples of them riding dragons. So they may have not been dragon lords. They might be Valyrians, but they may have not maybe used that horn. It's I don't know. There's a lot of questions with it. There's a lot of
and I don't want to change. I'm not changing the subject here, but I don't want to change the question that we're asking. I think there's also, you got to ask yourself with this theory, what does ride mean? Is ride simply being able to get on a dragon, as you said, Brett?
Yeah.
Is ride being able to literally say, let's go here? I mean, if we look at Fire and Blood, we don't really know if Arya wanted to go to Valyria or Balerion wanted to go to Valyria, and she was just on his back. But there's also a difference between and I think the Starks kind of prove this. There's a difference between riding a dragon and, as Dany will eventually come to learn, wielding a dragon.
That's a great point.
Getting it to do something. And I think the Starks are kind of evidence that there is some telekinetic bond, whether it's an ancient blood of the first men, or in particular of the Starks, or there's this inherent green seer ability that exists in certain people on Planetos that they can combine with these. We talked about this, Brett, I think maybe in our episode with Frank about the original pitch for Dany, and does she have some telekinetic ability with her dragons? So is green seeing separate from the Valyrian blood? I don't know. Like that to me is also riding the actual wielding, getting a dragon to do what you want.
Right. I think anybody who can hop on, and I mean, Arya is a great example. I think it reads a lot more like Balerion sort of like put on his homing beacon and was like, boom, going to Valyria, since he was actually born there. And it's like, if you're just along for the ride, you're not really riding the dragon. This is now a very scary situation as opposed to a powerful one.
And then we see that with Dany too, where Drogon goes back to the Dothraki Sea.
Exactly. Right, to his home.
That's probably a parallel. That's probably a Fire and Blood in Dany parallel. I think certainly.
Yes, definitely.
Great point. Great point.
Yeah.
I think the blood also makes the ability circumstantial. It makes, again, we're never going to know. Just like back to the Tyrion Targaryen with the DNA test, we're never going to know the truth. But I also think it kind of lessens it, because I've seen a lot of people comment on this theory, or people honing, and I don't think this is necessarily a fleshed out theory as Tyrion is a Targaryen. This gets to kind of what you think, and a lot of people react to this type of theory in the fact that it almost makes you seem like, this feeling of like being an Aryan, that you're special, you're better, you're more important. And that also kind of turns people off of this theory,
right?
And the fact that well, we don't want that. We don't want to see that in this story, that you have to have this bloodline to, and to be honest, I don't think same thing with George with the time period he's using. He's not being sexist, he's not being misogynistic, he's not supporting or condoning violence. He's using it as a reflection, and he could also be using the fact that blood is important to tell, just simply tell the story. It's not that he's saying, well, these people are more important, these people are more special. That's not what he's doing. He's just saying, in my story, there's a reason for it.
Well, and I'm thinking too, you've got, we don't know how all this works, but if we've got these different types of bloods that do different things, have different abilities, because it is a fantasy world, some people might have this ability to ride dragons. Some people might be able to warg into wolves. Some people can't warg into wolves. Some people have to just warg into, birds. And there's just different, and then you've got the children of the forest and whatever they do, they make White Walkers or something, I don't know. It definitely, I like it, and the Valyrians they were very elitist, so they.
Oh, definitely.
Sure.
So I think maybe that's where that comes from, and then people kind of correlate it with that. But
the Varamir is a good point.
Yeah,
that they're even within the ability to skin change or to warg, there are levels. There are levels. It could be the same thing with blood dragon riding, that there are levels. Yeah, you can hop on, or yeah, you can maybe get it to go a certain direction. But I think we're going to talk about when we get to the next theory about the wall and everything. Sometimes the dragon has a will of its own, though, even when it's bonded with someone of Valyrian blood. But yeah, I think this is really fascinating theory and discussion, because it's so circumstantial. It just, at this point, we just don't know for sure.
And there wasn't. I think this is not a very well liked theory, for good reasons, and there's not a lot on it. I found more, people arguing against it, so I had to kind of, pick some of this stuff apart, and which made it, pretty difficult. But also, I think, jumping back to the dragon seeds, all those dragon seeds, all the new dragon riders were straight off of Dragonstone, which I thought was interesting in that time period.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And the fact that the Targaryens are from Dragonstone, they practiced Prima Nocta there for a long time, and the riders came from there. I think that's a good clue that, people of Targaryen descent or Valyrian descent or something like that, it's an important aspect to being able to do this. It's it checks a number of boxes in order to be able to do this.
And I didn't even so like a lot of people think, maybe it's just you've got to be brave or strong, but we've seen plenty of people are just random people. They were, well, I think I went over this a little bit with Hugh the Hammer and stuff, but yeah, so I mean, but then you get instances like Quentin, who gets, roasted pretty immediately, even though he does have Valyrian blood. So
yeah, I think with the dragon seeds, as you mentioned, honestly, I think it's really likely that they do have Valyrian blood in them. They're from the surrounding area, and over generations, it's just really likely that even some of the people from the eastern coast that are around Dragonstone very likely have some amount of Valyrian blood in them. So then it again goes back to the question of, well, how much do they really need? Are the dragons really sitting there being like, oh, nope, not 25%, doesn't work. And I don't know. It's likely the dragon seeds do have some amount of Valyrian blood. I know Nettles is maybe supposed to be a red herring, that like she might not, but she just as easily could. Yeah. So yeah, I think there probably is something to this theory. Until we have more concrete evidence, we're never really going to be able to tell. Again, I agree with Travis. I don't think we're ever going to get the answer to this, like that you need X amount of Valyrian blood or any at all. Yeah. I think it's going to be something that we're kind of set looking at the narrative for. So,
well, and hopefully this didn't jump around too much in this part, but I mean, the last thing I have here is in Gagasos, they had the flesh pits. From what I understand, is that was like kind of like pre Valyria, and Valyria kind of came from that.
There's a History of Westeros episode setting in my podcast that I've yet to listen to about it. So
yeah,
I'm not familiar on what on all the details.
I do know that Gagasos has, and I'm pretty sure it was pre Valyria. They have something called the Flesh Pits, where they made it man and beast, and apparently they had like twisted half man beast creatures that came of it. And when Daenerys has, you know, her son, it looks like a dragon, and so a lot of people go back to that. So, you know, it could be it could be it's some sort of genetic engineering that the Valyrians did to be able to ride dragons and stuff like that. So it could just be straight up genetic engineering is why they're able to do it. But you know, I don't know. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun talking about these. I loved how Tyrion Targaryen and Valyrian blood for dragon riding, of course, go together. We won't get into Tyrion, how that might affect him, but of course, you know, you should know with previous theory that could, of course, potentially raise some questions about him. But that being said, this was a really fun discussion about Valyrian blood. We'll get more of it, I'm sure, as Fire and Blood Volume 2 comes out at some point, and of course the remaining novels in the book. But do you guys have anything else to add, or are we ready to move on to our last theory here in our first crossover episode?
Yeah, let's move on.
I'm ready.
All right. So the last theory that we'll be presenting here today, I will be presenting, and it's a personal favorite theory of mine. This theory has been around in bits and pieces for a long time in the fandom, so definitely can't take credit for the totality of it. There are a couple bits and pieces here that I probably put my own take on, but in reality, and with all the theories we've discussed today and that we will in the future, the fandom has done such a great job of piecing together these theories over 20 years of analyzing this book series. So it's fun to continue to go over them and kind of present our own takes on it. But the theory I'll be presenting, let me take a big breath before I go through this essay, essentially, was what I originally wrote about the Ice Dragon theory. And in short, the Ice Dragon theory states that there's an ice dragon frozen in the wall that borders the Seven Kingdoms from the north. While this may sound kind of crazy, there's quite a lot of reasons that this might actually make sense. So let's evaluate all of the evidence here. So let's look at the wall to start with. And feel free to jump in here, guys, if you have any additions or thoughts that come up as I go through this. We know that the wall is more than just ice and stone, which Benjen, I think just in the show specifically, tells us. But in the world of Ice and Fire, Maester Yandel states that the children of the forest would contribute their magic to the construction of the wall. And as Maester Yandel, of course, goes on to explain, he believes this is only a legend and that legends are dubious and you shouldn't believe all of them. However, as readers, we know that the children are not only real, but still alive. So this idea that the children contributed magic to the wall, it seems very likely, and probably is. We've seen, as I'll continue to go through here. Then let's look at the Black Gate that we see in A Storm of Swords, which clearly has magical properties of its own. It's this hidden subterranean gate that allows passage to the other side of the wall. It's said to be as old as the wall itself. And on the Black Gate, there's a face that is old, pale, shrunken, and wrinkled with white eyes, and it glows. And when someone approaches the gate, the eyes open, and they ask, "Who are you?" And in A Storm of Swords, I believe this is, Sam has to say the words of the Night's Watch. He says them, and then it says, "Then pass," and the door's lips open wider and wider until nothing remains but a great gaping mouth in a ring of wrinkles. So I'm going to call this magic here, guys. This is magic going on the wall for sure. And then as they're going through, Cold Hands, who has been escorting Sam and Gilly at this point, tells him he can't pass. He's like, nope, magic runes can't go through. So we kind of get a pretty clear indication there from one of our characters who's, whether he's a character or being controlled by somebody, he cannot go through the wall due to magical constraints. This then logically raises the question about the whites in A Game of Thrones that the Night's Watch brings back to Castle Black. However, we know that these whites were actually carried through the wall by members of the Night's Watch. So there seems to be, and this is the others really kind of also showing that there is magic, right? They have to actually trick the Night's Watch into getting the whites through the tunnel to the other side, right? When these whites are found, and these are some of Benjen's men who have been missing at this point in the first book, they're found in a clearing where there's no sign of a fight. There's no blood. These men were clearly left here. And as rereaders and readers of the story, we know that this was the others who sort of put them there to be found. So this shows that the others are also aware of this magical barrier. It's also interesting to note that they're then raised beyond the wall. So that tells us that this barrier is literally the line of the wall. And once on the other side, you're able to use magic and raise the whites for the attack on Lord Commander Mormont in Jon. That occurs in Jon 7 or 8 in A Game of Thrones. But bottom line, the wall is in fact more than just stone and ice. This is a magical barrier of some sort. In the last part that we got in Fire and Blood, just to tie Fire and Blood into this, we get a letter that Queen Alysanne has sent back to King Jaehaerys, where she indicates that she attempted to ride Silverwing over the wall, and Silverwing very mysteriously would turn back and not go over the wall. Now, dragons, as we've talked about in this episode, being very, very magical creatures, it seems very likely that this is the dragon, Silverwing in this case, interacting with that magical barrier and not being able to cross. But the point here, there's magic on the wall. This is not just a giant barrier, a physical barrier, it's a giant magical, metaphysical barrier. So, what do we know about magic in this world? We know that magic always comes with a price, and typically it's a really heavy price. Magic does not just, as we mentioned earlier, it's not like mana classes where you can just, sort of raise your hand and say the spell and boom, you got fireballs coming out of your hand or anything like that. Magic is sort of uncontrollable and requires a cost. We see Dany use accidentally give the life of her unborn son to save Drogo in a way that she did not expect. Of course, he comes back basically a vegetable. And we then later see her use blood magic with Miri Mazdur and Drogo's body and her dragon eggs to raise the dragons. We see Melisandre and followers of that faith use human sacrifice and the blood of royalty to perform magical feats. Craster gives his sons to the others to keep them at bay. Bottom line, magic comes with a price. So what could be sustaining the magic of the wall? A 700-foot tall, 300-mile-long magical barrier. What on earth is making this work? We know that you can't just give runic spells to something and make it work. That's one thing we do know about magic in this world. Well, if we look at dragons are fire-made flesh, intensely magical creatures. Following their return at the end of A Game of Thrones, the pyromancers of King's Landing cite that their abilities have seemingly been stronger lately. I actually just read the A Clash of Kings chapter the other day, where before the Battle of the Blackwater, Tyrion is talking with one of the pyromancers, and he tells Tyrion that he's made 13,000 jars of wildfire. And Tyrion's like, what the hell? That's like twice as many as you said you were going to be able to. And the pyromancer tells him, well, hey, basically, our magical, our runes actually is the word he uses. Our runes and spells have been working strangely stronger soon. And then he literally asks Tyrion, are there any dragons around? So we're seeing that dragons make the magic of people in this world stronger. We, of course, then see this with the warlocks of Karth, who also want Dany's dragons, and Dany for this reason, that dragons increase their magical ability. Quaithe also tells Dany about this is also in A Clash of Kings. That's the book I'm reading, so like all of my source material comes from the book I'm currently going over. But Quaithe Incarth tells Dany about a flame, not a pyromancer, but he's a guy that she sees in the market who's climbing a flaming ladder. And Quaithe tells Dany how he used to not be able to make much of a spark, but now since the dragons have returned, he's able to climb the ladder up 20 feet or something. And basically the point here is just showing that dragons are used as excuse me, let me take a drink of water here. We'll take a break. Think about everything I've said, everybody. The point here is we see in our source material that dragons are used essentially as magical batteries. They increase the magical ability of pretty much everybody in our world that we see. So that would give us precedence that dragons are literally used as a magical battery. So far, we've got the wall is a metaphysical barrier that's reliant on magic. We have multiple instances to prove that. We know that magic comes with a price, and we know that dragons in our actual text of the main story are used as magical batteries. So it makes a lot of sense that a dragon could be the battery that's keeping the magic of the wall working. But that's not really enough to prove the theory. Okay, this makes sense that maybe this is plausible, but let's keep going and look at the Horn of Winter. Now, we discussed horns earlier with Dragonbinder, but as we talked about Dragonbinder, we have another horn in the story that plays a pretty prominent role and is very likely to play a prominent role in the remainder of our story, and that is the Horn of Winter. Now, the Horn of Winter by the Wildlings is an ancient tale of a long king beyond the wall, Joramund. And it's said that he supposedly blew the horn and woke giants from the earth. The Free Folk also believe that blowing the horn can bring down the wall. In A Storm of Swords, Mance Rayder actually threatens Jon that he will blow the horn and bring down the wall if the Night's Watch does not let them past. Now, we of course know that Mance doesn't have the real horn. The real horn was found in A Clash of Kings when the Night's Watch visits the Fist of the First Men. While there, Ghost actually, which is very interesting, we know that dragons are magical creatures, so are direwolves. And Ghost leads Jon to this cache that's been left by a brother of the Night's Watch somewhat recently of dragon glass and an old cracked horn. Now, Jon actually blows this horn, it should be noted. However, it is specifically noted that the horn is broken. It has a big crack in the side of it. So when Jon blows the horn, no sound comes from it. I've seen people saying that, wow, this can't possibly be the real horn because Jon blew the horn, thus it doesn't work. But it's said to be broken. And more on that later. Keep in mind, the horn is broken. So if we look at our only other magical horn, which is Dragonbinder, in A Feast for Crows, Euron Greyjoy shows up at the Kingsmoot with a giant ornamented horn covered in Valyrian glyphs and writing. He calls it Dragonbinder. He claims that when blown, the horn binds the will of a dragon to the blower. One of his men, Cragorn, blows the horn. The glyphs on the horn glow red hot and then white hot. The horn's noise sounds like the screaming of 1,000 souls and seems to listeners as if their very bones are aflame and searing their flesh from within. The man who blew the horn is later opened up by maesters after he dies from blowing the horn, and when they open him up, his lungs have turned to ash. So this horn has some magic shit going on with it for sure. Whether or not it actually will end up controlling a dragon remains to be seen. However, for this theory, we can just assume it works. I mean, it clearly has magical properties, and we're going to see in the Winds of Winter if that does include actually controlling a dragon, as Euron claims. So this connects back to our only other magic horn, potentially, the Horn of Winter. If the Horn of Winter is in fact a magic horn, seems very likely that it has similar properties to the only other magic horn we see in the series, Dragonbinder. this could mean that the Horn of Winter, in fact, wakes a giant ice dragon, thus waking giants from the earth, and that would result in bringing the wall down, which is the other part of the Horn of Winter legend. The Horn of Winter also has the same ability, which I've covered. So as far as the horn being broken, let's talk about that for just a minute here. Currently, the Horn of Winter is presumably with Sam in Old Town. Now, John gave the horn to Sam because he likes old things, he said. And Sam probably still has this on his person, although it actually hasn't been indicated as of recently. Unless I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But it's very likely that he has it in Old Town. And Old Town could very well possess knowledge on how to fix the horn. If ever there was a place where that knowledge would exist, it's in Old Town. If not, Euron currently is also in the Old Town greater metropolitan area. So he has a history with magic horns and may actually know how to fix the horn or make it work. So seems very interesting that this magic horn of winter that wakes giants from stone that will bring the wall down just so happens to be in the direct path of a lunatic villain character who has a history with horns that claim to work on dragons. So this theory is making a lot of sense. Let's look at our actual textual evidence here now, because there's a lot of it. In A Clash of Kings, Bran asks Osha if she knows the way to the wall. She says, "The way's easy. Just follow the ice dragon." The ice dragon is a group of stars. It's basically the northern star in Westeros, and it's repeatedly used throughout the text to lead people north towards the wall. It's pretty much always that star indicated in the same sentence of the wall, which is already super sketchy. George does these things all the time where something being in vicinity of the text of something else is an indication that they're important to each other. In A Storm of Swords, Bran, Jojen, and Mira literally use the ice dragon to lead them to the wall when they're lost traveling north. In A Storm of Swords, Jon is talking about the stars and says that he was old friends with the ice dragon. In A Storm of Swords, Jon later uses the ice dragon to lead himself north back to the wall after abandoning the wildlings. And then we get some really interesting bits from George here, where in A Storm of Swords again, while walking through the tunnel that goes through the wall, this is in a Jon point of view, it says, "The ice pressed close around them, and he could feel the cold seeping into his bones. The weight of the wall above his head, it felt like walking down the gullet of an ice dragon." In A Dance with Dragons, Jon then again, while talking about the wall, they're riding the winch down, and it says, "They rode the winch lift back to the ground. The wind was gusting, cold as the breath of the ice dragon in the tales old Nan had told Jon when he was a boy." Again, in the next chapter, in Jon's next chapter, it says, "The road beneath the wall was as dark and cold as the belly of an ice dragon, and as twisty as a serpent." And then in Jon 10, so this is 2 Jon chapters later, in A Dance with Dragons, it says, "The snowfall was light today, a thin scattering of flakes dancing in the air, but the wind was blowing from the east along the wall, cold as the breath of the ice dragon in tales old Nan used to tell." And then in A Storm, in the Sworn Sword, Dunk again uses the ice dragon as guiding him north towards the wall. He's actually not going towards the wall, but guiding him north. Then the last bit here is in the World of Ice and Fire. And this is really interesting to tie in with the Horn of Winter legend. And it reads, this is from Maester Yandel, "Of all the queer and fabulous denizens of the Shivering Sea, however, the greatest are the ice dragons. These colossal beasts, many times larger than the dragons of Valyria, are said to be made of living ice with eyes of pale blue crystal and vast translucent wings." So this then shows the connection between the ice dragons and the stars, of course, with their eyes, and the fact that they're giant, many times larger than the dragons of Valyria. So this waking dragons from stone thing and causing a gap in the wall seems like it might fit. So in conclusion, we know that the wall is a magical barrier. Magic in this world comes with a price or cost. we have precedents within the books that dragons are seen as and used as pseudo-magical barriers. So a dragon would fit as the magical source to power that magical barrier of the wall. The existence of Dragonbinder gives us precedence to see the Horn of Winter as a dragon horn as well, and the verbiage surrounding the Horn of Winter waking dragons from stone and bringing down the wall would fit an ice dragon waking from the wall, since they are described as being giant and bigger than Valyrian dragons. On top of all this, the wall in the north is repeatedly associated with ice dragons within the text. So that's the theory. Thanks for sticking through it. I know that was kind of long, but I wanted to go through it that way because it's a really fun one that I like.
No, I really like that one. I before hearing that, you know, I've heard the theory, but the way you broke it down, I'm like, that theory is, you're taking the text too literal. But then I don't know, I do like that now. I want there to be more dragons, and then an ice dragon would be awesome, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of an ice dragon before. I've obviously read a lot of the theories about the Horn of Winter. I love the fact that the two are tied, and I'm trying not to give too much away about this theory, what I feel on it. But I love the fact that not only could the Horn of Winter bring down the wall, but it could also potentially release an ice dragon, and that the ice dragon, again, back to the previous theory, if dragons are magical creatures, then basically there is a power plant of an ice dragon within the wall powering its magical ability. I really love that. I think that that's a very interesting thing. It would certainly be something that I would love to see in the story.
A lot of the ice dragon trapped in a wall thing, though, is, you know, that's something a lot of people correlate with Jon, but of course it's George. He has double meanings for everything. So, you know, the cold seeping into Jon's bones as if he was in like the gullet of an ice dragon. Well, he gets stabbed later on. That's foreshadowing, and also maybe that he's inside the wall in one of the ice cells. So it's I like it. Yes. I like it a lot.
So especially the fact that and first of all, Kyle, you did an amazing job. The theory is great, and what you have provided is excellent, and I hope you're able to put it in essay format in the future and release it. But specifically the symbology, or the symbolic use of blue, very important, especially as it correlates to Jon.
Oh, great point.
With the blue roses of Lyanna, the fact that Dany in her visions in House of the Undying sees a blue rose growing from a chink of ice, and then the fact that the dragon is described as having blue eyes, and in this theory is technically inside the wall. I think Brett is particularly right that is a huge point to parallel Jon's story and point toward Jon. Not saying that this isn't accurate. I'm simply saying that it also has a double meaning in the fact that it illustrates a lot of Jon's story and Jon's arc.
Yes. So I didn't really present my againsts here, but a lot of the counter arguments, as you both said, against a lot of these ice dragon points are that, well, this is just talking about Jon's Valyrian heritage. And it certainly is. It certainly is talking about Jon being a dragon, associating Jon with the dragon. He symbolizes ice within the story, so he kind of is like the ice dragon, right? That being said, a couple of these are a little different in my mind, just to like counter argument, in that a lot of the times the foreshadowings to Jon being a Targaryen are about him, right? He's looking into the flames, or he is like a dragon, or he is pretending to be not Aemon the Dragon Knight, but the young dragon who invades Daeron, is it, or Daemon Targaryen?
Well, I think he did pretend to be Aemon the Dragon Knight.
Was it Aemon that he did? Yeah. So it's very much about him, whereas a lot of these ice dragon metaphors are specifically about the wall. So while definitely still foreshadowing the dragon heritage and narrative around Jon, it's kind of strange that the wall is so often associated with this ice dragon idea. And maybe that's just George using words to be descriptive, right? Like a writer has to write good sentences so that they're interesting. But yeah, definitely the one for me that stuck out when I was first really looking at this theory was, well, what does power the wall? Like, how is it just? Have these spells really just lasted 10,000 years or whatever that number is? So there should be something that is powering that magical barrier.
I kind of just thought of something like, if that wall does fall and an ice dragon escapes and they have to like put it down, like, do you think that ice dragon could have once been a regular dragon that was transformed into an ice dragon, then then they used that to build the wall, and they kind of trapped it, and maybe Dany will probably have to trap one of her dragons in a wall and sacrifice it to put the wall back up.
I hadn't thought.
That's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of came to me. I don't know. I hope it doesn't end that way, because I feel like I want the issue resolved. But maybe history is a will, and maybe
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the bittersweet ending. Like, it's gonna happen again. Maybe.
I hadn't thought about Dany having to trap one of her dragons in the wall again. I don't know about the etymology of like ice dragons versus dragons. Again, we just don't know exactly. We have legends of like the dragons came from the volcanoes or whatever. There are legends of ice dragons as I presented, but
George wrote a book called The Ice Dragon.
Right,
it's obviously a children's story. And I'm not saying there's information in there, but this debate emerged after season 7, if you remember, and there was a huge fight over whether Viserion was a white dragon, WIGHT, or an ice dragon.
Right.
And I think the conclusion that most of the fandom came to is that in George's world, an ice dragon is a separate
thing from it. Yeah,
not creature. Not a separate species of dragon. But a separate dragon itself that that has a specific makeup of blue, and I just wonder if this is something. Sorry, Claire's crying in the background. If there is something, if this is something the producers, the showrunners pulled to use in the show, did they change it up and say, well, we want to give we're not going to have Euron do his thing. We're going to give the dragon to the Night King, and we're also going to make it a white dragon instead of an ice dragon escaping. Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting
my point,
question.
Brad.
Sorry.
No, I definitely was. That's a great point. And what I was going to say is the show very often combines characters, right? Jon in Battle of the Bastards is presumably taking over Stannis's Battle of Ice role. Jorah takes John Connington's basically storyline in A Dance with Dragons. So my thought too when I was looking at this was, well, maybe the Viserion becoming a white or an ice dragon is their take on, well, okay, we're not going to have a giant ice dragon in the wall that brings the wall down. We're going to make Viserion a white or ice dragon who will bring the wall down, and that's their take on it. So I was like literally winding up to say that, and I'm like, damn it, Travis. So no, I agree is what I'm saying.
And to kind of give a little basis to like a transformation of a dragon from like a fire dragon to where they might have to do like a magical transformation. You get kind of like, Mel in the story, like she was probably born a normal human, but then, she's always like, everyone can feel heat coming off of her, and there's something going on with her, like she's went through some sort of transformation. So stuff like this can happen, And obviously the White Walkers, they've been through some sort of transformation to be ice, icy. So I don't know, like, but yeah. So that, I mean, that's all I really got. But
yeah, this is a fun theory. There's some definitely textual evidence for it. I think the big kicker is Dragonbinder actually a dragon horn, right? Is Euron's claim correct or incorrect? So I think that's going to be the one that if in the Winds of Winter we see Victarion blow it and it in some way works, I think you're then going to have a lot of people looking at the Horn of Winter and saying, well, is that what that one does? So we'll see.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really like this theory. I think it's very interesting, and not just consolidating characters. Even talking about the show, consolidating characters, but they may also look at purely budgetary and think, well, we can't have 3 or 4 extra dragons in the show, so we've got to use one of the existing ones to tell, quote unquote, this story. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. I wonder if the Ice Dragon is released, what it will do. And Melisandre wants Stannis to burn.
Gotta get that Stannis plug.
Edric, gotta get Stannis in here. Yes, gotta get Stannis in here. Sorry. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just a thought that came to me. We know Melisandre looks into the flames and she sees things, and she frequently misinterprets them. In fact, I was looking at something last night that Joe Magician said, and Kyle, you may have been on this thread. I don't remember, but he said actually, I think it was our friend Josh, 7.34, at 7.34 on Twitter. Joe Magician said, if Melisandre sees one thing, look in the exact opposite, and that's probably the truth. Not that Melisandre is completely wrong, but she just misinterprets. She's trying to get Stannis to burn Edric to wake dragons from stone. She thinks, a stone beast technically will take off from Dragonstone, or she thinks it will, again, endow Stannis with the ability to fight the others, him being potentially a stone dragon in her view. If they take Winterfell and they begin to think about, are there dragon eggs or whatever under Winterfell, and the others are coming, and Shireen, etc., play all that out in your mind. Everybody knows that theory. What if at some point in her vision she's seen a dragon take off in the north? Now, that could be one of Dany's dragons or one that Euron captures and uses. But perhaps she's seeing an ice dragon being released from the wall. And again, she's just misinterpreting it. She doesn't really know what it's going to be. Again, she sees it and she's trying to create the path to get there, but it's completely wrong. It's just a thought I had that potentially Melisandre even thinks it's something that's going to happen, although the circumstances are wrong in how she thinks it's, or how it actually does happen.
That sounds really cool, because I'm just thinking of like Jon coming back to life and being released from the wall as well.
Yes,
which I know this is more about that ice dragon, but then you get this ice dragon too, which is cool. So
that's brilliant. That's great.
and of course he'll be a transformed human at that point too. So
transformed. You like this transformed dragon idea, and hey, maybe that's it, man. I mean, you might be right. Who knows?
Well, and to be fair, I'm taking I'm taking influence off of LML because he talks a lot about his theory of how Jon's going to come back is really cool. And
he's got some crazy cool theories. I gotta say, that guy.
Yeah, and like the Jon stuff's really cool. Like he theorizes when Jon comes back to life, he's going to go into Ghost, but then they're somehow going to transfer back into Jon's body, but Ghost's personality is going to come with him, and Ghost's body is going to die. And then Jon's hair is going to transform white, so a little more Targaryen. but he'll be more brutal and wolfish, and icy, you know, kind of like that. And then he'll take on like a new kind of personality, which I thought, you know, like if that happens, I'll be like badass. So I forget which episode that is. I'll have
you need to find that, because I'm trying to think if I've heard that, and I really want to listen to that one now.
I know it's probably a couple years old. It's one of the first ones. Well, not the. It's when I first got into them, though. It's an older one, but yeah, I'll try to find that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely to anybody listening, if you are interested in mythical astronomy of ice and fire, I know I'm a big LML fan. He has some really interesting takes on some of the more really out there. I wouldn't say out there necessarily. I mean, he very, very well supports his arguments, but he has a great background knowledge in myths and legend that George uses in his own work. And I think he's kind of one of the leading forefront in that regards within the fandom. So he does some excellent stuff, kind of in this ice dragon theory realm. But yeah, this is a theory that I really like, and I don't think I have anything else to add to it. Any other points on this one here, guys?
No, I think I'm good.
Great. Well, I guess that's going to bring us to the end here, where we want to go back through and briefly vote and give our opinions. And right now, and subject to change in the future, we're going to say right now, today, January 26th, 2019, yes or no to if you believe in this theory. Definitive answer. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So Tyrion is a Targaryen. He is the son of the Mad King Aerys and Joanna Lannister. Brett?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I don't think we'll ever get a for sure answer, but I think I'm going to say yes. As much as I don't like it, I do not like this theory, but I'm thinking there's so much evidence to support it. Yes.
All right, we have one yes. Travis?
All right. So as I said at the beginning, I have been back and forth on this theory for, let's see, a number of years now. So I never, ever believed this theory. I thought it was wrong. It didn't feel right. About a year ago, I changed my mind, began to look at some of the evidence, and thought that it was true. I came in today, and in working on my part of the script on this episode, thinking that the evidence proved that it was true. After looking at that, after talking with you all, after going through the evidence, I'm going to say it's not true, because I think so. We frequently cite the Nauticast and our friends Poor Quentin and Brendan Beefish,
of course, yep,
throughout all of our episodes, but just on Twitter as well. Emmett has this question he usually asks about a theory or a prediction, and he usually says, "Does it feel right?" And to me, Tyrion Targaryen does not feel right. Yes, I think the evidence, you know, the dates, the fact that Joanna is in King's Landing in 272, and then a few months later, she gives birth, lends you to believe that Aerys had sex with her and created Tyrion. But she was also absent from Tywin at that same time, and so she was in the capital with her husband. He could have easily had sex with her as well and produced Tyrion. So to me, other than that specific date and then the specific months later, I don't think the rest of the evidence feels right. And we went through all of them that you can, you know, with a lot of this evidence, you can look at it both sides and say, yes, it means it's true. No, it means it's not true. I just don't think it feels right. I don't think the fact that Tyrion is a Targaryen feels right. I think he is a mirror to Tywin, and that to me means more for the story. It has more impact on the story than it ever will. But as we said, I don't think it'll ever be proven one way or the other. I don't think George will ever reveal whether it's true or not. Hell, George might not even he might not even know this is a theory. He might be like, "What the hell?"
And now you got me second guessing.
I think that's what we're going to be sitting here talking about this one for many years to come, guys, about if you're a supporter or not of this theory. So, oh gosh, now I have to say what I think about this theory, because I do have, as I said earlier, this theory used to be one I kind of scoffed at, and now it's really gotten to the point. I mean, we went through it here today, and it's like, wow, the evidence for is strong. I mean, you definitely can propose this theory with some strength. It doesn't feel right. And Brett, I mean, you might be right here in saying yes. I'm gonna say no, and I kind of thought I might have came into today being convinced to say yes, and I almost was. I mean, Travis gave a really great rundown of the evidence before we got into the cons. I was shit, I'm gonna have to say yes at the end of this episode, damn it. But I am gonna say no for now. I just haven't, it doesn't quite feel right, as you said. I'm gonna say no to the theory, hopefully, for now.
That's the way I feel, but then it's like it might just not feel right to me because I just don't like the theory, but I don't know.
Well, that's true.
I'm gonna stick with my yes. I think it is.
Great.
But
so we've got one yes and two no's for Tyrion is a Targaryen. It's pretty good for 33% for Tyrion as a Targaryen is not bad. So that'll move us to Valyrian blood, and this is kind of tricky, but let's say for now, today in the modern story, in 301 AC, whatever it currently is, do you need Valyrian blood in order to be able to bond with and ride a dragon? Yes or no?
I think in the current story, like you worded that, like, because I was gonna, kind of.
That's why I worded it that way.
Yeah, I think, with that wording, I think yes. Just, it's, I don't know. It's just the Targaryens are fairly new to Westeros. I mean, they've interacted a little bit, but it just seemed, and they have like, there's so many Targaryen bastards. It's hard to know who's got Targaryen blood or not. But the only new dragon riders you get were from that weren't Targaryens per se. Was in A Dance of the Dragons, and they were all from Dragonstone. So I'm gonna go yes.
Strong point.
Yeah.
Travis?
Yes. Yeah, no, I really don't like how you worded it. Thank you for boxing us in. Yeah, I do think it's probably important, and I still contend that it doesn't make it unfortunate. It doesn't, make Targaryens or Valyrians or people with the descent, special, or, well, it does make them special. It doesn't make them superior. Right. That's the word I'm trying to look for. But I do think that there are levels. If you hadn't said bond with or even willed, I would say no, because I do think that there's still especially in the show, I do think that there's still a possibility that Bran will be able to either break the bond between the Night King and the White Dragon, or even take over a dragon himself, or even maybe ride. But that's not bonding, right? He has the ability to warg and control, which I think earlier on we didn't make a good distinction between that those are separate. Again, there are levels of the power and the ability. There's control, which I think the Night King is doing with the White Dragon, right? And I think Bran also does this. But yes, I do think Valyrian blood is important in being able to ride and bond with a dragon.
I didn't think of that though too, because Bran, he controls Hodor, like, because he senses Hodor in the back of his mind when he's warged into him, or green seared into him, because I guess you can't warg a Hodor. I guess I don't know, but anyway, so Hodor's scared or something, so he is basically controlling, and that's not bonding. I do like that.
Yeah, interesting distinction. And I didn't mean to word the question to be overly limiting. I mean, I did, but I would say, I'm going to say yes to that, to living dragons who have their own will, due to some reason that we just don't know, of Valyrian blood of some sort, or at least the magic that is in Valyrian blood, if that's a thing, is necessary to fully bond with and control a dragon. That being said, I would agree with both your points and with what Travis was saying, that controlling the Night's King is likely, very, very, very likely, not a Targaryen of any sort. God, I hope we don't have to talk about how he's a hidden Targaryen too at some point in the future.
Right. He's a hidden Stark.
Right, and he probably is actually. I mean, he very, very likely is actually a hidden Stark, or not even hidden Stark. But so I'm going to say yes, Valyrian blood is important. So hey, we all fall on Valyrian blood in some way, and I don't think, I mean, like you said, not in a superiority way. I just think the evidence points to we would need more to say that anybody can bond with. I think that's really the point, is being able to have this Starkish-like connection with direwolves, very similar to how Starks are the only ones that can bond with these direwolves in the way that they bond. Targaryens and Valyrians are the only ones that can do it with dragons that we have evidence of so far. So
yeah.
So last theory here, the ice dragon theory, that there's an ice dragon in the wall, providing the magic that keeps the wall a metaphysical barrier, and that in the end of the story, the Horn of Winter will wake a giant ice dragon that will create the barrier that the others will come through. And you two can go first on this one. I'll go last.
You know what? I want this to be super fantastical toward, and become even more fantastical towards the end as the magic rises and becomes known. I'm gonna go with a yes on this. You sold me on it.
Nice.
It's this one. This one's kind of one of those. I like it so much, I'm just going to go ahead and believe it. But it's kind of the opposite of the other two. The other two I really did not like, but there's just a lot of evidence towards it. So, I'm like, okay, let's just be logical. Yeah, well, from what I see, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I believe those, even though I don't like them. But this one was one I wasn't completely convinced on. But on the other hand, the way you explained it, and I didn't even think about like using it as a power source, like an ice dragon, and that it could, what is going to bring that wall down? Well, it could be that horn, but maybe that horn awaken, breaks the whatever the magical chains that are on this ice dragon. It's able to fly from the wall. So, and they're using it as a power source. So yes, I like it.
Nice. Travis?
Yeah, I would go with yes as well. And I think really? Brett hit it on the head when the fact that magic and the fantasy elements are increasing in the story as we get closer to the end. Whether they'll be there after the climax, I don't know, but they are increasing. I think that, and this is something the fandom kind of said after season 7, that they had never really considered that a dragon could potentially bring down the wall. I think Aziz actually said, well, actually there were some theories early on that potentially that could happen. But a lot of people were like, oh, I never considered a dragon bringing down the wall. Now, in the show, I think that's going to be completely different.
Yes.
But if the dragon binder horn wakes or if the Horn of Winter wakes a dragon and it emerges from the wall, busting out, the wall collapses. And if it's also the source for the power behind the wall, then the power goes away and the army of the dead and the White Walkers can cross it. Because I think that's one thing that I don't think the show failed
I know right where you're going. Yeah.
To like if there's a magical barrier, to me that's almost like, you know, like if you think of like Alien, when there's that mist above the eggs in the first Alien movie, and they cross it, and you know, once under it, then the aliens, then the face huggers come out. Like to me, a physical structure isn't necessarily, it doesn't end with the limit there, right? It would be almost like it's just a field that goes on forever that you can't cross. So to me, the show, they they busted down like one section of it, and then they crossed it. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with that, but what I'm saying is there has to be some innate power that is ended. Now in the show, it could be the dragon flame that ends not only tears down the wall, but ends the magic sewn into the wall. If the ice dragon is let loose and flies away, then obviously the power source is gone. I think also Melisandre is key to this. I think, you know, where she states that her power is much stronger at the wall, I think she would also be able to feed off of feed off of that source there. So I do think that this is real. I would not be surprised to have an ice dragon also in the story in The Winds of Winter or A Dream of Spring.
Yeah. Now, what would be very interesting is if the ice dragon just like busted out and then flew away. It's just like I'm out, you guys.
That was one thing that was one thing I was going to ask you all about. Like, what does it do once it's out? Does it just adios? I've been in here 8,000 years. I'll see you guys later.
I mean, that could very well happen, and that might be why Dany would have to transform one of her dragons somehow, you know, because they can't find this other dragon.
I do think that that's interesting. I never considered that, and while I don't want a wall at the end of the story, I think it's perfectly plausible that there would be one. And I think that's a good point that you made, Brett, about does Dany have to kill one to, or does she even? Hey, here's something. Just a thought that came to my head: is the army of the dead coming south? And Dany at some point decides, I gotta slay my, like if a dragon comes out, an ice dragon comes out, and the wall's magical abilities are now gone. Do they then slay another dragon to try and replace that magical ability, and it fails? That could kind of be a sacrifice that happens that doesn't work. I think that's then too many sacrifices that don't work. That doesn't make sense now that I've said it. It does make sense that I said it, but I don't think it's right.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe some sort of interesting Nisa with one of her dragons parallel.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm kind of reaching with this, but we've seen Dany chain her dragons up before and struggle with it, and she did it.
Yep.
So.
Stop convincing me.
Yeah.
There's something, there's some more here. Even I think I'm gonna go ahead and say a strong yes. I was kind of hoping for more opposition, maybe even because I like want to stick my name out there and say I think this is what happens. Like I think this is the answer to the Horn of Winter and to Chekhov's wall. I don't really see other mechanics that fits better, I guess, as to how the wall is going to come down and why, and how the Horn of Winter plays in. Maybe it's a red herring, I don't know, but I kind of think this makes sense.
I think that does. Yeah, I knew the wall was coming down, but I never really could think of, or no one's really even thrown out something that really had like a good answer. And that one that one I think has a good answer to it, and a way in which the spell can be broken, and using that dragon as a power source. I think, I like it. I like it a lot.
Great, awesome. Everyone agrees.
And one more thing, as to the fate of the ice dragon, if one of the dragons is bonded to Euron, one of Dany's dragons goes to Euron, or even Phagon, perhaps, then perhaps the White Walkers get a dragon and the Ice Dragon comes to their side. I mean, I think that's also
very possible. Yep. Yeah, I think very possible. Yeah, my thoughts were either that Euron gets the Horn of Winter and blows it, and whether that binds it to him or accidentally binds it to there's no Knight's King in the books, but to the others. We still don't really know the mechanics of how these horns work. It's kind of changing points on what this theory is going to look like as the books continue. But
what if? I mean, you get the dragon binder horn, and it roasts. It chars the inside of the one guy's thing. What if he blows the Horn of Winter and it transforms him into a Knight's King figure? And he gets on the
I've heard that. Yeah, that theory is definitely out there. And honestly, I mean, you said it with Cragorn, who blows the horn. Dragonbinder, and the inside of him is turned to ash. Certainly it seems likely that Euron blows the Horn of Winter, and this maybe turns him into an other or a Knight's King figure. I know poor Quentin would love this idea. He's very into this idea of Euron being a Knight's King sort of figure, and I think it's very possible even that is actually part of this, and that's what happens. So
the only problem with it though is, on the Dragonbinder horn, the guy died. And I don't see what would make Euron any, special, it would seem like it'd still have the same effect. He would just die from freezing. So I don't know.
Yep, that's definitely the question, is what is going to happen with who blows the horn, Victarion, if he will die when he blows it. But we're getting into the weeds on that. To recap here, as we finish out this episode, so we voted on Tyrion is a Targaryen. And we had one person say yes, Brett, and two of us, me and Travis, in opposition for is Valyrian blood necessary to bond with a dragon, which I tortured the question to get my answer. All three of us said yes. And then the ice dragon theory, is there an ice dragon in the wall? All three of us also said yes. So a lot of agreement today on today's episode. Before we close out here today, any extra additions, guys?
No, I think we're good.
No, I think great episode, great discussion, and look forward to more.
Awesome. So that will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. We had a ton of fun recording this episode and are looking forward to future crossover episodes in the series. Special thanks to George R.R. Martin for crafting your incredible world that we all get to live in every day. Thank you to Discount Nostalgia and Lunar Halo 24 for your contributions to my podcast. And thank you to the fandom, and of course to Sir Travis and Brett for joining me and allowing me to continue working on their podcast as well. So till next time, have a good one, guys.
Thanks.
And
bye.
Cut.
Bye. All right.